Welcome to Yom Machshava on the Dash, your sponsor, Lunishma Sarim Yakashom Leabas Yitzchok. We're holding Avoda Zara Daf Tes. The Gemara in Amud Aleph concludes the raya, the proof, that the Romans and Am Yisroel had a joint alliance, and for the first 26 years after the Jews conquered the Greeks, meaning in the time of Hanukkah, the Romans allowed the Yidden to govern to a certain extent. Now, the one thing to try to understand is, historically, we don't find that the Yidden fought the Greeks together with the Romans. And the mashmos of the Gemara is that the Romans and the Yidden, they divided the Malchus. They had a joint government. We don't find that in history. I in the Tosis read in the Chesed base here in the Gemara, the Tosis read says that in our Gemara it says that the Romans took the Malchus, took the kingdom from the Greeks. On the other hand, we know the story of Hanukkah is that the Chashmonaim beat the Greeks. Where do we have that the Romans beat them? So it says, Tosis read, the Jews beat the Greeks, but they didn't take the Melucha. The same Melucha the Yavon had, which was Moilech in the world, that the Romans took. So the Am Yisrael did the war, and the Romans are the ones that took the Malchus. And the Mashal goes on to be Marich, that we know. The Pasuk says, Kasher Torit, that Yitzchak Avinu gave the bracha to Esav, that they're only going to have the koyach when Am Yisrael does not have the koyach. Uloim Elohim Yomatz. And the Gemara says, Amal lo acharevo, right? When Rome and Edom and Am Yisrael, if one of them is full, the other one is empty. One of them has koyach, the other one does not. So the Romans, says the Marashal, which is Edom, they depend on Am Yisrael. If Am Yisrael is the one who's moilech, so the Edom cannot. If Am Yisrael is not, so the Edom could. So that's the discussion here in the Gemara, that the Romans depended on Am Yisrael to win the Greeks. And when the Gemara says that if one of them will be Melachim, the other one will be Afriche. If one is Afriche, one will be Melachim. In other words, different levels of Melucho. Says the Mashal, depends on the Schus and the Chayiv of Klal Yisrael. If Am Yisrael is Schus, they are the Melachim. If the Am Yisrael is Chayiv, so the Romans are the Melachim. And very similar says the Torah Chaim over here. You can't have two kings holding one crown. And we know that by Yaakov and Esav it says Le'oim Elohim Yehemotz Kishazek Kam Ze Nofel. So that's why they made the agreement to do it together. And the Mashal adds that there was the Ma'aseh of Simon Labanim that the Gemara really mentions, is that Esav offered Yaakov, let's be together. We'll go together after they met. We'll go together. And Yaakov told him, no, you go first. You go first. You'll be moilech first. So the going together was the 36 years that the Romans tolerated Am Yisrael. And then when they're Mishaben and Am Yisrael, when it goes back to what Yaakov said, you go first. So with all this Marim Ekoimis and going through the Sugyo, Efsha, the Pshat in our Gemara, is not that the three Pashtas, there was an actual alliance between Am Yisrael and the Romans. But we're talking here about the conceptual ideas. The Maharal always says in these Gemaras, he doesn't speak about this here in this Gemara, but he always mentions that when the Gemara tells us stories and Maisi that happen, it's not an actual Maisi, but it's a conceptual idea. One example is what we just saw recently when the Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu went and offered the Torah to the Umas Olam. Says the Maharal, it wasn't an actual offer, but conceptually the idea does the Torah fit Umas Olam, and the Yisroel to tell us that the Torah does not fit them. So after here as well, the pshat is the Am Yisrael are the ones who beat the Greeks. That is clear. That's the Ma'aseh of Hanukkah. That's what allowed the Romans to be in control of the world, because the Romans don't have koyach elam koyach Am Yisrael. That's the remez. The fact that Am Yisrael beat the Greeks, that's what gave the Romans the opportunity to be the ones who Moshe Bekipa, the ones who are controlling the world. Once the Romans are in control, the fact that they allowed Am Yisrael to rule, it's as if they made an agreement together that we're going to be together. It doesn't actually have to be. There was that Maisa, that there was an agreement, there was an alliance, there was a written peace agreement between the Romans and the Jews. But the fact that the Romans did not come and be mishtabed in Am Yisrael, and then it caused them any tzaras, the first years of the Beis Chashmonai, that has Mikorach, the Maisa of Simon Labanim, that Esav agreed that Yaakov should go together with him. So although the Gemara writes that there was an agreement, you'll be a Melachim and we'll be African, so on and so forth, actually it wasn't an actual agreement, but that's how it was revealed here in this world, that the Romans allowed Am Yisrael to have some Melucha during this time. But two things that we learn from our Sugi, which is very neged to us in these days, is Esav can get its power only from Yaakov. It depends on Yaakov. Either Yaakov b'mahalosoi gives the koach to Esav, or when Am Yisrael is down, so then Esav gets his power. And second, when you see Esav connect to Yaakov, it's only something temporary. It's what Esav suggested to Yaakov, let's be together. But Yaakov rejected it and said, no, I'm going to come Lasid Lovoi and I'll take control. Until then, you're going to be the one in charge in this world. The partnership of Yisroel with Esav does not last. Anyone who wants to join the Shomachshava email list to WhatsApp group, please email shomachshava@gmail.com.